Mike's on. How you guys doing? Hey, thanks for the warm welcome this morning, for it being a snowy morning. You guys are fired up. Let's go. Well, my name's JJ Rosner, if you're here for the first time, and I'm the senior pastor here at Westside, and I'm really glad that I get a chance to hang out with you guys this morning. So if you're here for the first time, super glad that you're with us. If you're watching online with us for the first time, thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the service this morning. Just think of this as your home away from home during the holidays, yeah? Good. Well, hey, listen, we're in this series, but before we get into it, just there's three things that I want to throw at you real quick. Is obviously our Christmas service. Does anybody remember what day our Christmas service is on? The 19th. Yes, it is. It's also, does anybody else know what the 19th is for Sunday church? It's the last Sunday of the year for Westside. Ooh, crazy, right? That sounded like very intriguing. The reality is that we take the Sunday after Christmas off as a church so you can be with your family. So it's not really that intriguing. It just means that if you show up here on the 26th, like, you'll be the only one. You know, you and a couple other people that forgot or didn't come to church when the announcements were on, right? That's right. Yeah. No. We want you to enjoy that weekend with your family. And in the past, we've done something online, and I'll probably jump online at some point and throw a little just encouragement and love at everybody on the 26th. But also, so those two things are happening. But then in January, every single year, we go into 21 days of prayer and fasting. It's a great time for us as a church. We've been doing this since before our church started, where we just say, we believe that if God gets the first part of everything in our life, like, the rest of our life just works, and God does great things in our life. And so we give him the first part of our year, and we go into 21 days of prayer and fasting. And really, it becomes one of the most exciting times of our year. And you're like, how is fasting that exciting? See, it's not about the fasting. It's about the result of the prayer and fasting. Like, the testimonies that end up coming out of those 21 days, how people experience direction in their life, how they experience the presence of God and answered prayers. I mean, it's pretty awesome, the stories that end up coming out of 21 days of prayer and fasting. And so I'm just giving you ample time so that you can prepare, so that on January 9th, when we get ready to start 21 days of prayer and fasting, you don't walk in like, ooh, I guess I'm just gonna, I'm gonna fast broccoli this year. That's what I'm fasting. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, that doesn't count, everybody. All right? So just start praying, thinking about how you want to engage. Obviously, it's between you and the Lord, but we just want to make sure that you are aware that that's coming very soon, and we're excited about that time. Cool? All right, so we're in Advent, and this is the second week of Advent, actually. And so, man, I hope that you are participating on some level. What we wanted to do is we wanted to give you as many resources as we could so that you could participate in Advent on your own in a very meaningful way, and maybe gather some people around to do that. And so we've got some great resources that are online you can download for that. Last week, though, we talked about there's 4 elements of Advent. There's hope, there's peace, there's love, and there's joy. And last week we talked about hope. This week we're going to talk about peace. Next week we're going to talk about love. And Christmas service we're going to talk about Thank you. 3 of you got it. It was really good. Like, man, you were much more excited when I came on stage than you are right now. So I hope I'm not boring you this morning. I'm just kidding. I'm being a little bit facetious. But as we go into talk about peace, we have a real problem right now. And see, I feel like I suddenly got your attention. It's good. Like, peace almost feels like it's hard to find right now. Peace in the day and age in which we live, circumstantial peace, situational peace is very hard to find. A recent study shows that of millennials, how many millennials are in the room today? We love you. We're not going to judge you. Raise your hands. All right. Those of us that are Gen Xers, we love you. All right. So millennials, for those of you that don't know, is in terms of population, are currently the largest generation in like 100 years. Okay, so they are a large group of people. And a recent study says that 53% of millennials believe that our nation is heading towards a civil war. We got a problem. Yeah, JJ's not a little hyperbolic. I think it's a little hyperbolic, but that doesn't change the fact that 53% of those of you that are millennials think that we're heading for a civil war in our country. think that speaks very loudly about the day and age in which we live. I think it speaks very loudly about what's happening out there in culture that's around us. And I think it speaks very clearly that, Houston, we got a problem, okay? You know, when we think of peace, though, part of the problem, we'll talk about this morning, but I think part of the problem is how we perceive what peace is supposed to be, just as a people, as human beings, right? Let's do a little exercise. Do you guys mind? No one's going to play a trick on you, but would you just close your eyes for a minute? And what I want you to do is I want you to visualize the place where you experience peace. Maybe it's on vacation, and in your land of peace, there's a beach somewhere with a beautiful green blue ocean with palm trees. For others of you, there is a mountain landscape on the side of a mountain. Others of you, you have skis or snowboards on your feet. For some of you young parents, like, your vision of peace is your child sleeping right now, you know. Like, for some of you, though, it's that paid in full stamp on your bills. What is peace for you? You can open your eyes back up. And here's the reality is that your sunset, so to speak, the picture that you see where peace is probably different than the person who's sitting next to you. And chances are that it's circumstantial peace. Okay, so in other words, that peace is based on an experience that you have or lack of experiences that you have. Okay, so for many people, this idea of situational peace is what we call this. And situational peace is this idea that if we can just control our circumstances well enough, then we can remove the things that take peace from us from our scenario. So therefore, we get rid of stress, we get rid of anxiety, we get rid of chaos, we get rid of some people in our lives, we get rid of them. And the problem with situational peace is that we have to control all the circumstances in our life to make them all align perfectly so we can experience what we call peace. But outside of situational peace, there's a different kind of peace. And there's a biblical peace. I think one of the reasons why we're having such a hard time finding peace is because we as a society, just people in general, we've put so much on situational peace because this idea of biblical anything has been erased from society in our country. Okay, so if you're watching from outside of the United States, that may or may not be the case for you, but here in the U.S., we've removed anything that would be considered biblical out of society, and so therefore, we're no longer experiencing some biblical peace. Like, what is biblical peace? If situational peace is this controlling of circumstances, then what is biblical peace? Is it now that God controls all of our circumstances? That God has the outcomes all planned and ready, that he's controlling every piece of that? Maybe, but you can't control any of it. So what is biblical peace? Well, the Apostle Paul, he's writing to a church in Philippi, and by the way, while he's writing to this church in Philippi, he's writing from a prison, a Roman prison at this time. I love the Apostle Paul. I mean, this guy was like the unsinkable ship in his attitude. I mean, he was shipwrecked and stoned, and they threatened to kill him and to take his life. And that guy, he just kept going, and he had like the greatest attitude about it. It was like, hey, Paul, if you don't stop preaching the gospel, listen, we're going to throw you in jail. And he was like, will ya? Oh man, that'd be so great, because I got like several letters I got to write to these churches I planted, and I need some time, and I need to be isolated from some people for a while. Would you please put me in prison? You know what I mean? They're like, hey, listen, we're gonna cut your head off if you don't stop preaching. He's like, oh, would you, man? Could you hit it right here? Because that's gonna settle. That's going to settle an argument that I'm having. Is it better to live because it's Christ, or is it better to die because it's gain? Like man, he had this beautiful attitude about life. And where did he get that? Like, where did that come from? Well, he kind of alludes to it here in this letter that he's writing to the church of Philippi as he's writing from a Roman prison. And he says this in Philippians chapter 4 and verse 7. He says, then you will experience God's peace. This idea of biblical peace is this idea that Paul, he brings to us, and he calls it God's peace. Or in other translations, it's the peace of God. He says this, man, you'll experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. Like, wait a minute, time out. I've been trained to control my circumstances so that I can align my life in a way that has the least amount of friction as I go through this thing. What do you mean it goes like it exceeds, it goes beyond my understanding? I think you could probably call it irrational. He goes on to say, his peace will guard your hearts and your minds as you live in Christ Jesus. Situational peace is limited. It's very limited based on what you can experience here. But God's peace is limitless. And this is my big idea for the morning, everybody, is God's peace is limitless. So we have to try and figure out how to experience and live in this biblical peace of God that passes all of our understanding. It exceeds our expectations. At times it feels like it's irrational because it hits our life in moments when it seems like there's chaos raging all around us, but we walk through it like the Apostle Paul. Oh, would you? Oh man, it's just going to be so great for me. Like, who is that guy? I think it's somebody who is experiencing, he's trying to put words to something here in Philippians chapter 4 that he can't quite paint a great picture for us to understand because it's something that he has experienced and he's having a hard time explaining it. So therefore, it's above what we understand. God's peace, limitless, a limitless peace, not based on our circumstances or situations. Like Paul literally is saying that there's a confidence that's available to us in the middle of storms, in the middle of chaos, even when our situation and circumstances aren't all good. We can experience something better and something more. And I think we're living in a time, ladies and gentlemen, that, man, we need this God's peace thing. I think that we're living in a time where if we continue to look for circumstantial peace, situational peace from the world, we're going to be sorely disappointed in what it is that we actually experience in life. And then what we'll do is we'll start to run from God instead of to God, because what we think is how God answers prayer is just makes life a little bit easier for us and smoother for us and smooths out our circumstances instead of doing a work of God, a work of the Spirit on the inside. Jesus was a great picture of this peace. As a matter of fact, there's a really fun story in Mark chapter 4. If you have your Bibles, you can turn there. But in Mark chapter 4, so Jesus and his disciples, they're going to this town called Gennesaret, and they have to cross the Sea of Galilee to get there, right? Everybody remember the storm, right? Jesus, he's sleeping in the back, and he speaks to the wind and the waves and the storm, peace be still, and there was calm. I want you to see this picture of God's peace at work in the person of Jesus. Check this out in Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 38. It says, this is what Jesus was doing, by the way, while the storm was raging, everybody. Jesus was doing what? He was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. Really? Interesting. The storm that raged and that popped up just suddenly on the Sea of Galilee, for those of you that don't know, the Sea of Galilee is 700 feet below sea level. Crazy. It's like one of the only places in the world that is that far below sea level, and it's a giant body of water that is below sea level. And so what happens is it actually kind of creates its own weather systems because of that. And so storms just pop up all the time on the Sea of Galilee. And so here they are, these guys that are, they're piloting this boat, captaining this boat, they're getting them across the ocean. These are professional fishermen, commercial fishermen. They are not they're not novices as it relates to the Sea of Galilee. They understand how storms come up. They know how to maneuver their boats. They know how to get in and out of the storms. They are experts at what they're doing out there. And this storm suddenly pops up, and these guys start to freak out. When the experts start to freak out, you got a problem. You know what I'm saying? If you're on an airplane and you hit some hard turbulence and you hear any type of nervousness in the pilot's voice when he comes over that intercom, something bad is going to happen. Right? You know what I'm saying? And so that's what's happening here. These guys, they are captaining the ship across Galilee. The storm comes up and they start to freak out. And the only person that could care less is Jesus. He doesn't care. He's completely sleeping. He's totally out. And maybe he was just a hard sleeper. Any hard sleepers in the house? I know there's one for sure. Because, she's sitting on the front row right over here. Listen, true story. True story. Listen, I'm so jealous because I'm like a light sleeper. It takes effort for me to get to sleep. And it's not because I'm worried or anything. I just I've got energy and I'm ready to go all the time. I can operate on a little bit of sleep for long periods of time until I crash, But my wife is amazing. She could just fall asleep anywhere. You give her 30 seconds anywhere at any point in time of the day and she can be out. You know what I'm saying? Which is such a great gift. People have no idea how great of a gift that is, especially when you're running hard. Man, you would like to just, just get a quick 10, 15 minutes in real quick, wake up all refreshed. I can't do any of that. I wish I could. It's like a superpower, everybody. And here's Jesus. I just think that there's a gift of God there because Jesus could do it too. You know what I mean? He did it in Mark chapter 4 in the middle of a storm. He was just out, right? So I understand this concept and how this happens. And so Jesus, he's in the back. He's sleeping on a cushion. And the disciples, they wake him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." Suddenly the wind stopped and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Do you still have no faith? The disciples, their response to this in verse 41 is they were afraid. They said, "Who is this man?" They didn't ask Jesus, "Who are you?" They asked each other, "Who is this man that even the wind and the waves obey him?" Who is this person that walks in a limitless type of peace that is not moved by the circumstances that are all around him? What is this picture of peace? That's not the kind of peace I'm experiencing at my job, I can tell you. That's not the kind of peace I'm experiencing with my family. That's not the kind of peace I'm experiencing while I'm at the coffee shop listening to people argue and fight with each other. That's not the kind of peace that I'm experiencing in the politics in my hometown or my home state. That's not the kind of peace that I'm experiencing in my kids' public school experience situation or in the private school experience. What is this? And Paul tries to explain it. He's like, "Listen, this is all I can tell you. is above what we can understand. This idea of peace. This biblical word for peace is a word in Hebrew that it's this word shalom. And the word shalom, it's interesting. It doesn't mean like I feel relaxed. It doesn't mean I feel like happy and rested. It doesn't feel like everything is smooth and my circumstances are okay. What shalom means is it means whole. It means complete. So biblical peace is this idea of, man, I feel whole. I feel complete. I don't need any more. I don't need any less. In Christ I am before I was. In Christ I am wherever I'm going. This idea of wholeness. Like Jesus was comfortable in his own skin regardless of the circumstances around him. Which then means like the chaos then that we experience would be this idea of feeling fragmented. Like, man, our life, like I've just so compartmentalized my life into so many different areas so that I can try to control the circumstances in all of these compartments of my life that I'll experience peace. And the reality is, man, the storm is a raging on the inside. Fragmented. Chaos. A lack of wholeness. A lack of completeness. No peace. Peace. It's a powerful thing, this peace. It's a powerful thing to feel whole, to feel stable, to feel planted, to feel secure and strong. Peace. When Isaiah the prophet, he prophesied of the season and the time that we celebrate right now. He prophesied of the Messiah being born, the Son of Man, the Son of God being born into the world. And he says this about who Jesus would become. Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. Speaking by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, he says, "For a child is born to us, a son is given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, Prince of Shalom, Prince of Wholeness, Prince of Completeness. And his government and its peace will never end." See, many of the Jews, even some of his own followers, his disciples, they missed who Jesus was because they thought he was coming in some political way to take power back from the Romans and establish himself as king on the throne. But really, what he was bringing was a whole new dimension of how we live in the circumstances of our life. Wholeness. And Jesus, being the ruler of his kingdom, being the ruler of his world, he brings this idea of irrational peace. And he exuded and was the example of this idea of irrational peace. He's this ruler, and his authority is supposed to be associated with wholeness. Now, this becomes problematic. Do you know why? How many Christians do you know, when you watch them walking on the earth, they look like they are just like people that are at peace, whole and complete and comfortable in their own skin? Like, that's a good place to laugh if you're self-deprecating at all, because that's hard for all of us. I mean, I know a few people that are that way, and you know what? They are not even the kind of people that you think they'd be. Like, we have a picture of these people in our mind, and they look like an old school Christian who, for ladies, they dress very modest, and for men, they're very well put together and well spoken, and their life looks like it's curated very well, and they look like they walk the right walk every single day, and they do the right things, and they don't do any bad things because they do all the good things right. And that's our idea of what this looks like, and that's not the picture of what this looks like. You can still be a very imperfect person and know that you are loved by God, and so therefore you live your life with a certain amount of wholeness. Not because of how great you are, not because of how great I am, but because of how great he has been. It's a great place to say amen right there, everybody. You got to get yourself off of this perfectionist tightrope so that you can find real wholeness, because it's found in him, not in you. If it's found in you, it's based on your circumstances and your situation now. Now it's based on the control that you think you have over all your actions. And now it's no longer based on what he's trying to do in and through your life. So let me give you 3 steps to finding this kind of peace based on Mark chapter 4. Number 1, we have to acknowledge fear and doubt. Like, we try to ignore fear and doubt. We try to look past it in our own lives, and we try to actually promote something different in our life as we're walking out, our Christian existence and our current life. When the reality is that there are things that are going to happen. There's chaos that's happening probably around your life right now where it's unsettling for you. So just acknowledge that you don't know what the future holds, and that it can be a little scary sometimes. Acknowledge the fear and the doubt. Like, Jesus did this immediately with the disciples. I mean, he acknowledged their fear right away. And you could see it in him immediately. I mean, it was like, teacher, don't you care that we're going to die? Man, I can't even imagine Jesus rolling over like, you're the expert here. What do you want from me? Like, immediately there's this reaction to what was happening in their lives. How do you react when something happens to you? If you fly off the handle, every time something doesn't go your way, you have to start asking yourself the question, do I really believe in God? That was a little too strong for Sunday morning? Because a couple of you guys, I know you're quiet because you're into it. Like, you're learning, and I see people taking notes. Like, those are the people going to heaven, are the people that taking notes. But when I said that, some of you actually did one of these. You kind of you looked at me out of the side of your eye right there. So it's okay. Let the Holy Spirit work on you this morning. And then Jesus says this in verse 40. He goes, hey, why are you afraid? And he just acknowledges it. Why are you afraid? Yes, I am afraid. I've got a little doubt, Lord. I'm not really sure how we're going to get through this situation that we're living in right now, but I just have to keep going, because in you anything is possible, not necessarily in me. Got to recognize, got to acknowledge the fear and the doubt. You know what I would do? You know what I do? It's when those moments hit me, I just tell God, Lord, I don't know how this is going to work out. I'm a little freaked out by it right now, to be completely honest. You know what's amazing? When you bring truth to God. This is why Jesus said, if you know the truth will set you free. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. It's because when you're honest with the Lord, then he comes and pours in the life that you need. This is not a new concept, but I feel like it's shocking for some of us, because we just get so into what's going on in our lives. Number 2, we're going to acknowledge the fear and the doubt. Number 2, we're going to recognize who's in control. We're going to recognize who's actually in control. Verse 41 says the disciples were absolutely terrified. Who is this man? That even the wind and the waves obey him, which is actually a really funny statement to me that they would say that, because they went to him for help in the first place. You know what I mean? Why did you go to him for help in the first place if you didn't think he was going to be able to help? It's interesting. We do that kind of stuff all the time. We go to the Lord, and then he does something, and maybe he does it a little different than we think he's going to do it. We're like, oh my gosh. That was amazing. This is every time I've ever experienced a healing in my life, not just in my own body, but when I've seen God heal people, like it's shocking to me every single time. You know, Shishelle and I were in the Philippines, and you may have heard me tell this story before, but we just saw miracles happen when we were in the Philippines. It was amazing. So a young girl who was born without a voice box, without a larynx, started to scream at the top of her lungs when she was prayed for. I mean, complete miracle, right? I mean, her parents, you should have seen the look on her parents' faces. I mean, complete shock. Right? Like you can't make that stuff up, right? And when you tell people stories like this, you know, like you tell good long-term Christians, they're like, yes, that's the way it's supposed to be. I'm like, really? Like, you're not around very many miracles if you say stuff like that, because when it happens, the power of God will shock you and a holy fear comes over your life when God actually moves. And that's why, like, we stand in awe of him and give him praise and honor and glory because he is greater than I. When you're in the storm, when you're in the chaos, you got to recognize who's really in control. Sometimes it makes it a little easier. Most of the time it doesn't. Speaking as somebody with some experience. But when you do, it sets you up to be able to offload the circumstances of life to take on something that is greater. Number 3. Got to find God's presence. We're going to acknowledge fear and doubt. We're going to recognize who's in control. But we have to find God's presence. And the reason why we have to find God's presence is because peace or a lack thereof is a byproduct of presence. Listen, when all hell is breaking loose in your life, all you want to hear sometimes is somebody say, hey, it's going to be okay. Sometimes all you do is you look for somebody, you look for a leader to get close to that has some sort of a calming effect on what's going on around you. But then what do you do when the people are not to be found? What do you do when Pastor JJ is like not there to say, hey, it's all going to be okay because God's got you? What are you going to do? You got to find God's presence. Because peace is a byproduct of presence. And I would say this, peace or a lack of peace is a byproduct of whatever you're spending your time with. Like whatever has the greatest presence in your life is going to affect whether you have got peace or don't have peace in your life. Like I'm going to tell you right now, like if you spend more time on social media and looking at the news, like your peace level, low right now, baby. I'm just telling you right now. You know why? Because the lack of peace is a result of what you have in your presence. When fear grips us, or when we don't know what to do next, we look for something that can bring, watch this, not a feeling of happiness and rest, but a feeling of completeness, wholeness, a feeling of I'm planted, my life is stable. Whose presence are you spending the most time with? Because peace is found in Jesus' presence. That's where shalom is found, is when we experience God's presence. The peace of God that passes understanding comes in moments when we're in his presence. You know, the psalmist said this in Psalm 56, verse 13. Speaking to the Lord, he said, "For you have rescued me from death. You have kept my feet from slipping. So now I can walk in your presence, O God, in your life-giving light." The thing with presence, though, is that it's going to require time. Because you actually have to go there and spend time in that presence. And this is what Advent is all about, everybody. Where we're intentionally making room in our life. We're making room in our schedule. Like the practice of Advent is to actually make room so that you can learn how to experience God's presence. So you can actually develop a skill that will allow you to bring peace to your life when storm and chaos rage. To invite Jesus into every area of our life. The sad thing is that it often takes a bit of chaos to remind us that we're not nearly as in control as we think we are. Isn't that the truth? Like I feel really smart when I grab my beard now. I've never had a beard before. Listen, people run to a lot of things to try and cover what's going on in their life. They medicate their life with substances. They distract themselves with entertainment and staying busy. Man, they run to unhealthy people and relationships. They run to whatever it takes. But peace is found in Jesus' presence. We're all running somewhere. But God has called us to run to Jesus, everybody. God has called you to run to Jesus. And when we do, Jesus gives us that confidence, that wholeness in the chaos. He gives us peace in turmoil. He gives us stability inside the storm. You know, the last year has been probably the most challenging year of my life, of our life as a family. I'm not, like the world's had a hard life, but for me and my family, we've had probably the most challenging year of my life. And that's saying a lot because I've been through some stuff. I'm just telling you. And I don't say that because I'm trying to garner any type of sympathy or anything from you. It's because I really want you to learn from my life, because as we've run to Jesus, like he's brought a wholeness and a stability to our lives in the middle of a storm. And for those of you that have been kind of on the inside of our story, I mean, you've said that to us. And that's an honor, but really it's a praise to our God. It's like, man, we have watched God do something awesome in a family's life that they couldn't have done themselves because they were planted in Jesus. And if 53% of millennials are right, everybody, you're going to need to understand how to find some peace. And hopefully, if we find the peace, come on, somebody, if we find Jesus' presence again And we actually invite our friends and family into Jesus' presence, and they experience a peace that is beyond their understanding, that exceeds, that's irrational to them, that they can't explain to others the way you can explain it, but they've experienced it. You know, and I'll bet we can avoid what 53% of millennials think is getting ready to happen in our country. You are such a greater leader because of who God has called you to be in this country. What God has called you to be in his kingdom than you think you are. Man, God's got something great for your life. You know, I was mentored by some old school men and women of God. And, you know, some of these old school men and women of God, you know, like they didn't really care about my, like, excuses. They're like, hey, if you want to continue to experience turmoil in your life, go for it. And they were awesome that way. They were just like, you know what? You want to keep going down that road? Go. However, if you want to experience something greater, this is what it's going to take. They're like, man, we don't play games. We hit our knees when we have to hit our knees. Like we go before God when it's time to hit our knees. We stop whining and we find some worship. We stop wandering and we start seeking. Just old school, like didn't take no for an answer, tenacious men and women of God who were just like, they were stable in the storm. They knew who their God was and they expected something greater from me. I expect something greater from you. That you would stop wandering and start seeking. That there would be no more games and we would hit our knees. That we'd stop whining and find some worship. And experience God's presence again in this house, in your house. That our world would change as a result of it. Amen, everybody. Come on, stand up with me this morning. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to start here, right now. Because there's no magic wand. Like, whatever you're experiencing in your life right now, there's no poof the magic dragon. It's just going to, it's going to change. No. It's not how this works. The way this works is that when we come close to God, he comes close to us. We're going to go into this last song. But while it's playing, I don't just want you to sing this song. I want you to go to Jesus. Like with your eyes closed, in your heart, I want you to see the throne of God. There are some of you got some chaos going on in your life, and man, you need to just talk to God about it, and let's just do a little business with the Lord this morning. And if you need prayer because you don't know how to pray about what's going on in your life right now, or you have prayed and so your faith is waning right there, Shishelle and I are going to hang out just down front right here, and if you need prayer, just come down. Come to Jesus this morning, and let's give him our hearts in this moment so we can experience this very thing that Jesus came to give us in his presence.